Welcome to White Women Wake Up. I'm Karen.
And I'm Jonelle. Together, we're diving into real, unfiltered conversations about what it means to wake up as white women in a world shaped by bias, power dynamics, and inherited patterns. We're here to challenge norms, examine our assumptions, and foster empathy through raw intergenerational dialogue. It's not always easy, and we don't always agree, but we do show up anyways. So let's wake up together.
Yay!
Hi, Karen.
Hi, Jonelle. It's so funny. I'm so glad we're doing this. Even if in the end, I've grown. I mean, I hope our listeners are growing along with us, but in the end, I'm so glad we're doing this together.
Mm-hmm.
How was your reflection? So we were reflecting
our echo chambers of life.
Echo chambers.
Social media echo chambers. I really walked away, again, surprised last week after we did the algorithm exercise. Because like I said, I have worked so hard to craft my algorithm to have diverse opinions that it was fascinating that when we did that exercise that it was not diverse and it was a pretty narrow focus. And so I went back, adjusted some creators, and I think the thing is, unfortunately, like the For You page is still going to show you what it keeps wanting. And so what my commitment that I need to start is I need to start going to my who I follow. Like there's different things. And so intentionally going to the ones that I follow
what it feeds
and versus what it feeds me.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of how I'm going to start switching it up and hopefully see a little bit of a difference.
Yeah. Well,
there.
You know what? It's called being intentional, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, I thought about the word echo chamber a lot this week, more in the language of who's in my life.
Yeah.
And how that's been an echo chamber.
Interesting.
Well, as a teacher, I live this really weird world, right? I'm with 20-year-olds all during the school year, and that space becomes, in a weird kind of way, my echo chamber.
Definitely.
And then all of a sudden, the summer, a lot like the holidays, becomes a time that I reconnect with friends and family. And now I get
your
into
retired neighbors.
My retired neighbors. I get into a different world, right? And so I was thinking how, in a weird way, I have these isolated bubbles.
Yeah.
And so I just, I don't know how that changes. I don't know if I go to a park and talk differently to different people. I don't know what I can do, but I just thought about it more in the conversations I'm having. Yeah.
I would say one thing that you do regularly that kind of spans both is you are in a great small group of very diverse opinions.
That's national.
That's national. That's national. Used to be international. There used to be a Canadian.
Yeah,
but
we did.
We miss you.
Yeah.
But I think that has been a good space to kind of like really talk through some things and kind of get some different, because there are a lot of opinions in that space too. And so that is something. And so I would encourage others too, if you're finding yourself in these kind of extreme echo chambers, maybe find something that's consistent in your life, whether it's a volunteer, whether it's a book club, or whether it's a study group.
Conversations around our podcast.
Yeah.
Because I do think our podcasts really, we bring up different topics.
Yeah.
So you and a group of friends, or you and some peeps in your world, or you internationally could get involved.
Or email us. We've had a couple great listeners email us, and we love engaging with them.
Yeah.
A listener recently, after our individualism topic, and kind of, they sent us a clip from, what was the movie? Oh my gosh, I'm so mad at myself. But they sent us a clip from a movie that just really helped them process kind of like what we were talking about. They're like, I saw this, and they're like, this made me think of that episode. And so it was like a great conversation starter. And so, we're also here to have conversations with you. If you feel like you don't have a community, email us. Yeah. We'll talk to you.
Yeah, we can start a community.
We'll happily start a community and a conversation with you.
Yeah.
So
because
thank you.
I do think this is about, this is going to be my topic.
Yeah.
Can I bring it up?
You can already bring it
Yeah.
up. But can I just say, so thank you to those of you who have been brave enough to reach out to us already and start conversations because you don't feel like you have a space in your personal community. It takes a lot and a lot of courage, and we love talking to you. So thank you.
And we have one thing we have talked about, what we've learned in this space is these are such nuanced conversations that they really need time to discuss. And not everyone wants the time or wants to invest the time. So, yeah. Okay. So I had an experience the other day where someone was telling a heartfelt story.
Okay.
And I could tell the listener didn't quite trust the story. And I've thought a lot about what you
back
said.
up a little bit. The listener, weren't you the listener?
No. I was witnessing. I was part of a conversation. Part of a conversation where two people were talking, and one person told their lived experience, and another person kind of didn't quite affirm it.
Okay.
So, and I got to observe this and see it from an outsider, like how tough that is.
Yeah.
So, and you talk a lot about like trusting the person with the lived experience, or trust the lived experience. So I wanted to have a topic around this topic. So the question I want to start...
A conversation around this topic, not a topic around this topic.
A conversation around this topic. That's why I need Jonelle. She helps clarify. Okay, so when was the last time you doubted someone's story and then realized the doubt was about your own discomfort? When was the last time you doubted someone's story?
That is okay. I have to say, I think the tricky thing in life, and we've talked about this a lot, that my trigger points, and I don't think I'm outside the norm in this, come from close family and friends. I easily can listen to a stranger's story or a colleague's story and trust their lived experience and understand, like, wow. But I think what happens when we listen to close family friends, we know the nuance of that personality and that person. And so we take into account all of these things, all these ideas that we've built about them through our times, and we kind of place that judgment upon their story instead of just sitting back. And so I have to say, this happened to me, and I've actually never told this friend this, and we'll see if they listen, but there was something that happened between a friend and her family, and it was a really horrific situation. But knowing this friend and knowing sometimes the situation that the friend get into, there was a period of time that I kind of just said, I don't know the story, and so I'm just going to kind of leave it at that kind of thing. A little bit how I've talked about like my previous years ago opinion on like abortion. Like, well, it doesn't affect me, so I'm going to stay neutral. And that was kind of my place here. And then the last couple of years, as I've really done more work and really recognized kind of like, okay, I'm so into the lived experience of all of these other women in their life. Why am I not taking that stance with my friend? And so it was really uncomfortable for me because I had to step back and take away all my preconceived biases about this person's past behavior in this to really say to myself, this is her lived experience. This is what she is telling me is her truth. And that's all I need to take it as.
Yeah.
Is her truth kind of thing. And I'm not saying to dismiss to say that that's her truth might not be facts because people get spread that. That's not it. I don't even want to go in that layered. I just want to go in order to support my friend. I have to listen and trust her truth in this matter. And that's all I can do. And it's not my place to bring judgment or bias. It's my place to support. But getting there to your point of uncomfortability was a lot of internal uncomfortability of even as like maybe another friend or like, partial friend of mine, but asked like my opinion on this or that. It took a lot of sussing out to just really want to be this open support system from my friend.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
And it's so funny because you're bringing up a lot of the conversation, which is like when we don't do that, the reason we don't do it has to do with bias
Yeah.
and so forth. And even as you were saying it, I thought I'm constantly dismissing people's story by using the old phrase, well, it takes two. There's always two people, two sides to a story. But I don't even realize that when I say that, it dismisses the other person's lived experience.
One thing you used to do when growing up, and you still do this, and it is like one of my biggest pet peeves, is I will say something, and because you haven't done your information, you goes, well, who really knows? And I'm like, I really know.
Isn't that funny?
I looked it up,
You
and
say
I
that.
know.
Yeah.
Like I told you, and it is this dismissive, and I know your intent is not to be dismissive. It's more like, well, that wasn't your information. You need to do your own info. You need whatever it is.
And I do that a lot.
You do that
Listeners,
so
I do that
often, and it can be for big things or little things, but it is like been the most dismissive frustration in my life. Well, who really knows? I literally just told you.
Okay, this is a great one. This leads to the next one. Can you remember the last time someone responded to your story with "Are you sure? That doesn't sound right," or "Do you or "Who really knows?" Where did you feel that doubt in your body, and what did it prompt you to do next?
Ooh,
where did you feel?
God, I feel like we're slipping into a therapy session.
Yeah, I know.
This is my therapist always says. He's like, where do you feel it in your body? Close your eyes and just feel it in your body. I have to think on that. Do you have an example?
Well, I do feel, I think, okay, this is a tough one because, of course, I've been thinking about this as asking you, not me being asked. I think when that happens to me and I tell a story of my own lived experience and someone says, "Are you sure?" or shrugs it off, this is going to make me cry. I think I have felt so diminished my whole life. In the stories I tell, I've just accepted it.
Yeah.
Isn't that awful?
That is awful.
Now that you say that, it's like I'm thinking about like when I've told this person that or this person that, people who haven't affirmed my stories, I just accept it.
Even as you say that, I could see your chest deflate, your shoulders kind of lean in.
And it makes me sad because I don't think I fought to say, this is my story, whether you like it or not.
Well, and I have to say, not necessarily with you, sometimes with you. There's another family member in particular that I do that often because I don't always trust their sources of information.
Well, this is what I was going to say.
And I have to say, so I've been more the perpetrator of this, and it's because we grew up in a household where my brother is a genius scientist. So he is very fact-based. And so he taught me, they say like your siblings is where you learn how to do war in life. And his war was psychological warfare on factual, like deep factual information. And so that's my...
But a lived experience shouldn't be a factual look.
Totally.
Yeah.
But this is what I'm saying. But I think this is the tricky part is in our family systems, a lot of times facts override, like external facts override lived experiences.
Yes.
That's what we're looking for. And it's so fascinating how dismissive that can be.
So I was just really curious about this. Like, why do we do that? Why don't we just listen to someone's story?
Yeah.
You know, I went to the park. At the park, I saw a girl swinging on the swings, and I went home and I had a cup of coffee. Why don't we just say,
well, because the stories aren't that simple.
They're not that simple. So one of the things that they talk about is heuristics.
Yeah.
And if you're into usability or any of these kind of studies, you know heuristics is a big thing.
Yeah.
And we naturally do that. This is part of our body.
Okay.
We do it for efficiency. We do it to save time. We do it for survival. So anything that is a mental shortcut your brain takes to make a decision, solve a problem, or solve up a situation.
Interesting.
So we're constantly using these heuristics
Okay.
in order to evaluate something. So one of the things as I was looking this up, there's language around this, and it's called epistemic injustice.
Yeah.
So treating the knower as society treats some knowers as more credible than others. This pair lived experience clips from Black or disabled or trans creators with research. We can see that that we have a certain different level for different people. So this epistemic injustice was coined by a woman named Miranda Fricker in 2007 to spotlight the power dynamics inside everyday conversations. Whose story do we believe? Whose do we doubt? And why? So one of the things that they talk about is we have a couple different biases.
Okay.
So we all have to put ourselves in this framework.
Yeah.
Why do we not trust someone's lived experience? First is proximity bias, they talk about. So we label some stories like that person's like me. I get it.
Yeah.
I trust them. They're like me. So this heuristic that's in our mind that we want to go somewhere fast, speedy, and quick. One of the ways we go fast, speedy, and quick is proximity.
Yep.
They're like me. So like last week, you remember you were talking about echo chambers?
Yep.
Guess what?
Yeah.
No wonder we're going to listen to those stories because that's someone in our echo chamber.
Exactly.
We also go to authority bias. So it's exactly what you said. Someone in your family, they want to look up the story.
Yeah.
Did it actually take place?
Yes.
Do you know, is it fact-based?
Yeah.
Or didn't your doctor tell you that? Did your teacher tell you that? Here's a big one. Did your pastor tell you that? So we don't trust a story unless someone in authority told it to us. And then comfort bias. This is a big one. If it threatens our worldview, we're tempted to doubt the storytelling.
Yes. And isn't this the case when we look at some of the most traumatic, the most informative situations are often uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so they base that. They're often then there's an authority figure that might lie about a situation. And so
they have a different worldview. So through their lens, we know the patriarchal lens is very different.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it kind of goes back, and this is really, but it's the whole conversations around sexual assault, especially in a high school, college format, is there's so often this, we used to teach our kids around, if they get drunk, if a girl gets drunk, she kind of says yes, but then says no later. Well, the guy is well, he's confused. She said yes at one point. And so I think some of the best kind of, clarifying points that came out of those discussions are enthusiastic yes.
Yeah.
It is not just a kind of yes. It's not a yes and then no, but she said yes one time. Enthusiastic yes.
Oh, you mean we have to consent
with enthusiastic yes, because I think it clears the lanes of this of the he said, she said situation kind of thing. And I think that's what often happens. Like you said, people have different perspectives. Oh, boys will be boys kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or she said yes at one point.
Well, I think you're hitting on something a little bit different. You're talking about the pre-story. You're talking about after I tell the story.
But this is still an after story because the reason the story happened is because maybe that guy, he had a different perspective of the situation. So that's what I'm talking about here is a lot of situations can happen because there's different perspectives of it. And so it's about how do you have also clarity before. I mean, well, you're right. Maybe it's a derailment.
It is funny because when we're talking about a shared live experience, you're referencing the Me Too generation.
Yes.
The Me Too generation. I had a boyfriend that beat me in college and it was horrible. I completely forgot about it. In fact, when the whole Me Too thing came out, I didn't even bring it up. I didn't bring it up until maybe several days into the Me Too. And I remember sitting and Dad and I were watching the news and I said, oh my God, I completely forgot my story.
Yeah.
even the way I entered into my lived experience story sounded so unreliable because it sounded like I lied.
Yes.
The only thing that sounded reliable is I had nothing to gain from telling the story, right? Like all of a sudden out of the blue, but I literally had forgotten the story. Then when I relived the story, I'm like, God, that was horrible.
Yes.
I just haven't brought it up in 30-some years.
Yeah.
So anyways, but this is fascinating because he could have not trusted that story. Yeah, great example.
Yeah.
So the comfort bias, like he was really uncomfortable that he wasn't protecting me or walking along. Dad.
Yeah.
When I was telling his story, he may not have believed
totally
because I didn't even say it believable.
Yeah.
Or
no, things look, and I think that's just. I don't know what I'm to say, but this is such an interesting topic.
It is.
About how, and I like it, they even say like witnesses, like story changing and stuff, and how people can be unreliable. And like I always think to myself that one of my biggest fears in life is to be wrongfully accused for a crime.
Oh yeah.
I say this all the time because I know my processing would be so off in trying to figure out the details of what they're accusing me from that I know I would look guilty. Like I know, and and so I think that's the same thing when something traumatic happens to you. People don't process all the same way, and so sometimes people do come back with stories or memories or things that might have been locked away.
Yeah.
And so, but all of a sudden it looks unreliable.
It looks unreliable.
And
I think one of the things, if we go back to why we're doing this podcast, we want to live an intentional life.
Yeah.
We don't want to like these assumptions. And so one of the things I think why this is an important topic is just to become aware of why we may not trust someone's lived experience. And so the proximity, the authority, the comfort, right? And then social endorsement.
Yes.
That's another one. Oh, my friends didn't see it that way.
Yeah.
My friends told me it this way. So I can't believe your lived experience. I was listening to another conversation that a person was having regarding a traffic stop.
Okay.
Now, this one person talked about it from a lens of research.
Mm-hmm.
If I get stopped by the police, this is what they'll ask me. That's the legal research. This other person said, wait a second, my lived experience is this.
Yes.
The person that had done the fact-based research could not accept the lived experience because everything in the books were saying it should look differently. And so that's that kind of research, that social endorsement. I, as a white person, am going to experience this very differently. And I don't know why you would experience it a different way.
And that's your point. That's also part of the comfort. Like it's uncomfortable to think that people could be treated in this manner. I think what was really interesting, we had a discussion recently with my aunt, who is a white woman, but she has 3 kids. 2 are adopted. And her son is of Guatemalan descent. And they had an experience with, police roughing him up a little bit in comparison to other white boys that he was with. And she talked about it, she was talking about it in this lens of it just was so painful and eye-opening to see racism firsthand experience. And it's not that she hadn't heard about racism, but in her white center circle, it was a far-off conversation. It was a far-off conversation that happened to people in South Side of Chicago. It happened, that's where they're from. But they're from Chicago, the northern suburbs, but not happened in her circles. And so there was this really disconnect there. Yeah. And so she really talked about how painful and shocking it was to just actually see racism that affected her home kind of thing. And just the shift that it had, but also the shift in her community where some people didn't actually fully believe the story of how it went down of like, oh, well, what was he doing wrong to deserve it or things of that manner.
That's the normative story.
That's the normative story.
Yeah.
And stuff. And so it was just so interesting to hear her unfold that story recently
And how it impacted her personally.
Yeah.
And now she sees it differently.
Yes.
Okay, so the one area, it's interesting that you should bring this up, but there's 3 areas that we can really see it showing up when we don't hear the story. And I know you have some personal experience, but we see it in healthcare.
Yeah.
So anyone who is outside of what we're now calling white standard norms, which is, the average height, the average weight, the average size, the average BMI, they will go in and share their story with healthcare providers, and healthcare providers won't believe them.
Yeah.
And yet, it's our lived story.
Yeah.
Like, why does it show up there?
Yeah.
It's statistically analyzed where Black women constantly go into healthcare providers and are not heard. Women, even
women compared to men,
with women healthcare,
yeah, and are not heard in the same regard. And it is so interesting that we don't listen, we don't believe, we want to trust the authority that the system is correctly set up for everyone.
Yeah.
And we've seen that's not true.
And we don't trust the and I didn't do a data analysis on this, but it would be actually interesting. Do we, we're saying we go in by proximity, we say we're going in with all these biases and prejudice, and we don't think we are, but has the news even shifted that? Like, everybody's a liar now, so I'm not going to believe anybody.
Well, this is a big portion.
That shifted our percentage of how we trust people.
So this is totally true, but I have a question kind of going back to your initial story, because I know. Anyways, what did you do in your situation with your friends?
When I was listening?
Yeah.
Well, I was just observing, because I put it this way, when I became aware of that story, it made me think more. In this case, I listened and I watched the listener. I watched the storyteller and I watched the listener.
Do you feel like that was the right?
Well, in this case, I think it was the conversation. I just happened to be invited to be part of their conversations. And I didn't disaffirm the live story. But it made me think about how many times in both cases I didn't hear someone's story. I mean, here's a perfect example. I'm a teacher.
Yeah.
And so I can't tell you how many students will come in and say, hey, my paper's late because of X, Y, Z. And I am getting better to trust the lived story. I am getting better. That's their story. But that's a hard one, right? Because my bias or the percentage of what I think is lying. But I'm trying, because that's their lived story.
But what I think is interesting about examples like these is so often we want to punish because we don't trust, it's lie.
Yes.
But the reality is, your students, if they are lying, their truth will come out. Whether it comes out in their test grades, their paper's awful, whether they turn it in late or not, you will see the truth come out if it's a sincere student who had an issue, kind of thing. And so you don't necessarily even need to punish the lived story, because the truth will unfold in their habits. And it's the same thing, well, actually, I won't even derail into that, corporate America and how their lack of trust for their employees, really with remote work, doesn't create an environment of trust or diverse thinking. But I want to go back to
it is interesting, because if we look at the lived experience of people, there is a level of trust.
Yes.
Right? There's this level of checking. That's one of the big things, like you had said. I had to check my own bias and intention. And we humanize people when we listen to their lived experience and we don't dismiss it. The other place that it shows up, but the workplace is one of them. But the other place it shows up is credibility in court.
That's a huge one.
So, for example, sexual assault. If we don't listen to the lived story of somebody and what happened, instead of pushing our norms on someone or pushing our biases on someone, there's really injustice that takes place. And then another one is the workplace, like silencing.
Yes.
We also, we're constantly silencing people, and then we're constantly asking people to prove it.
Yeah.
So like you said in that podcast about, I think it was a zero-sum game one, or the reverse racism. You know, this idea that we have to prove it, and so forth. We penalize that. Yeah.
Well, I have a reflection then for us, kind of based on because was the conversation that you were listening to, was it between two white women?
Yes.
Okay. I wonder though if it became something more around race. Like, what does that allyship look for you to actually step in a little bit? Is there an allyship? Like, and I'm not saying I wasn't at this. This is your lived experience. I wasn't in this conversation, but I do think there's potential more opportunity. We had something happen with us recently where I felt like I was kind of being scapegoated. And in the past, you would have blamed me to say, shut up and be quiet.
Yeah.
So it was great that you were stepped up from that. But what I asked you later is I would have actually appreciated your help in shutting down the other person.
Yeah.
I would have appreciated your allyship, because in that case, I was losing power.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't, though it looked like I was fighting for my power, I wasn't getting anywhere with my voice. And so I think
I can say, okay, if you use it from the lens of power.
Yeah.
In this case, the person that was telling their lived experience had worked through it enough that they had power in the conversation. Okay. They weren't flailing.
Okay.
And so I like what you said. Like, you're right. That's a really great way to look at it, like an allyship, not your situation.
Yeah. No,
I'm talking about the other situation. I think if I had stepped in, I might have diminished their power,
which is fair.
And so this is I think the way in which I allied here was to not dismiss their story and to not assist in the dismissal, because I think that would have been more like more on my typical to make the other person feel comfortable.
Yeah.
But I didn't, because the person with power, the person telling their story, had enough composure to demonstrate power that the other person was a little bit more uncomfortable.
And so where in my example, I didn't. I had lost power in the situation. Yeah. I had never scapegoat. And so, but the situation needed to be shut down. It needed to come from someone who had authority in this instance, or even just respect in this instance.
It's so interesting because over the last couple of weeks, I've definitely had the experience of jumping in to comfort. And you're right. We are it's one thing to comfort a child.
Yeah.
But to jump in and comfort adults because they can't handle the discomfort, maybe that's a place to start. Yeah. I didn't jump in to help this person who was just uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But so maybe I did ally in the space of just listening, not in your case, but in this other case.
So that's what I want everyone to reflect on.
Yeah,
is in conversations.
Well, I have a couple reflections. Okay, I'd love to talk about, and I'll wrap it up. So pause the instinct to fact check. Okay. And in your case, your lived experience, I did fact check. Now that I think about it, I looked up my phone to see if what you were saying was accurate. And I didn't just trust you.
See, I don't know if I agree with that, though, because there's two different conversations happening.
A lived experience should not be fact checked.
But what the conversation I was having was not a lived experience. It was based on fact.
Yeah. But okay, so let's go back to
a lived experience should not be
fact checked. So one of the things you referenced is some people in our family who are really smart can go to the space of you tell your story and then they fact check.
Yeah.
So this is one. Pause. The instinct of a fact check. Interrogate our own personal filter.
Yeah.
Not the person. Like, why are we not listening to their story? Why do we not believe? I think your first example was a really good one.
Yeah.
Where you said immediately I was questioning because I knew this person.
Yeah.
And I knew their history. And instead you started saying, well, maybe I need to just step back and trust their story. So interrogate. Is it our bias? Is it our prejudice? Why is it? Expand your interpretive toolbox. So read or listen to voices that are outside of yourself. So if we're saying that our bubble just reinforces why we trust a story, expand that story. Yes, it is possible that person may have experienced that. Like I have to say, when I was telling my Me Too story, it wasn't until I realized how casual I was that I realized, oh my God, I too can tell these kind of stories in that space. Sorry, we got someone mowing along in the background. Translate belief into action. So hold a position, manage the teacher-parent dialogue, adjust the policies and practices once you've heard a pattern of harm. So anyways, I thought that was really interesting. So reframing our perspective, listen to the lived experience, affirm the lived experience, check our biases. So something to reflect on. Those are some right there.
Those are a lot.
Yeah,
so we won't add on to that.
Yeah, we won't add
Well, anyways, thank you. Great topic. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on White Women Wake Up. We hope today's conversation sparks something in you, whether it's reflection, a new question, or a deeper commitment to showing up with empathy and accountability. If you found this episode meaningful, please subscribe or leave a review or share it with someone who needs to hear it, or even reach out to us. Again, we would love to talk to you and be in communication circles. You can also connect with us on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, or Substack. And then please check out our website, whitewomenwakeup.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts and keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay curious, be open, and keep waking up.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, Jonelle. Hi, Jonelle. Jonelle, it's so good to see you. I missed you.